Hello! 2 quick things before we start the show today. First, I wanted to say thank you to all of our wonderful patrons. For the sake of time, I'm not going to shout everybody out this time. I will shout out new member Mike Gilmer. Shout out to Mike. Thank you for being a cool guy and joining the Patreon. If you want to be a cool guy, a cool lass, or a cool human of any gender identity, you can head on over to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. We have a bunch of tiers to choose from. Each tier gives you some special goodies, including our schedule in advance, bonus episodes, the ability to choose the bonus episodes, and more. You can head on over to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio if you like the show and would like to join. Thank you to all of you. It makes my day every time I think about it. Next, I wanted to read a review at the top of this episode. Now, you might be saying, hey, that usually comes at the end. And you're right, it does. But this is the 100th episode, as you'll hear in just a few moments when I speak with Eric about it. It's kind of a special occasion. This was originally going to be the final episode of this miniseries, but can't be a mini-series of that's hosted by me without needing to be expanded because that's just who I am. I've accepted it. But, being that it's the 100th episode, we haven't got a review in a while, I thought I would read it up front. So this comes from our friends across the pond in Great Britain from Smoke It on Apple Podcasts. It might be Smock It based on how it's spelled. I'm not actually sure. But here's what they say. 5 stars. Beautifully insightful commentary. I happened across this podcast whilst looking for reviews on a game that I'd recently played, and comparing to other podcasts, this is one of the few that offers insightful commentary and a true desire to understand the creative intent behind games. Would recommend to anyone who seeks similar, but the only caveat is that the episodes delve into spoiler territory towards the latter half, although clearly signposted. But as a result, I'd perhaps recommend not listening to a full episode if you intend to play the subject game. Smoke it, not sure which. Thank you so much for writing in. Those are very kind words, and I appreciate you very, very much. If you would like to leave a rating or a review for us, you can do so wherever you get your shows. Spotify, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, etc. Though I will say, unless somebody directly tells me about it, I'm only checking Podcast Addict and Apple Podcasts for reviews. And that'll get you right on air. So, without any further ado, happy 100 episodes, everyone. Let's dive into part 4 of 5 of Final Fantasy IX. Welcome back again to Pixel Project Radio, the video game discussions podcast where we do deep dives and analyze all of our favorite games and some of yours too. We're back again with Final Fantasy IX, our continued coverage on this PlayStation 1 classic. Once again, I'm joined by Eric of the Unlockables podcast, Kingdom Hearts guru, but today he is our special mage on the show. I don't know. He's helping me get through this game because he knows it back to front like I do. Eric, thanks again for joining me, man.
Rick, 3rd time, happy to be here, man. Happy to be talking some more Final Fantasy IX. And gotta say, last episode ended pretty heavily. We were in our feels, but excited to keep talking about this game. And I hope it's been a real enjoyment for your listeners out there.
Yes, that episode got into some of the most intense feelings I think we get into in this game. Definitely one of the scenes in Black Mage Village that is most famous. For good reason. It's really powerful. But today, we left off last time right as we met Aiko, so we're going to start there today, talk a little bit about her, and move forward into seeing where she lives in Madain Sari. But first, this is the 100th episode of the show.
Woo!
Yeah, I originally wanted to make this the last episode of the series, but as happens a lot with me planning for the show, the scope kind of got away from me. But I did want to at least address it. It's a big milestone. I certainly never thought that we would get to 100 whenever we first started. I kind of figured we would peter out between 30 to 60, but here we are. We made it, and it's still going, still having fun. Very stressful at times, but very rewarding. So here's to 100. Here's to 100 more. Thanks everybody who has ever joined me on the show to help make this what it is. Eric, thank you. You've been on quite a bit. Thank you to the listeners who continue to listen and make it worthwhile. So, yeah, I don't want to make it a huge thing, but happy 100, hey?
Well, I'll interrupt, and I'll be able to be the first person to say happy 100 episodes, Rick. So first of all, I'll be able to lord that over everybody's head that I was able to congratulate you first on the 100th episode. So, because I'm here in person, so take that, everybody else. But wow, it's been incredible. And thank you for having me on as many times as you have. This has kind of been like, I guess you could say it's kind of like been my summer home for podcasting, coming in and collabing with you. And, what you're doing with just in the community has, pushed me to want to do better as well. So thank you for putting out such an amazing show, having such an amazing place for us to gather and talk about video games in your Discord. You're doing the Lord's work, my friend.
That's very kind words. I don't know that I'm entirely deserving of all of that, but thank you. We're going to keep doing it until it is no longer fun or until it is no longer feasible. One of the two. But that time is not now. So, yeah, let's jump right back into Final Fantasy IX.
Absolutely.
So we left off last time right after Zidane and Garnet got hitched, and Vivi and Quina, depending on how you're playing. So happy.
So happy.
We found little Aiko. She was the village thief, and now we're going to learn a little more about her. Turns out, Aiko can summon and use white magic too. And she says something really interesting. She says, everyone in the village could, my grandpa too. This is normal for her. So she offers, as a good host, to take us back to her home, Madain Sari, Village of Lost Summoners. I didn't find anything interesting about Madain Sari as a name. I think it's just a name.
Yeah, there's nothing I've seen kind of in any kind of other, cryptology or anything like that, or the way we're able to look into names for Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts and kind of draw a meaning from them. Yeah, it doesn't really seem to have anything. But the fact that it is known as the Village of Lost Summoners, Aiko apparently lives here, and we've been traveling with Garnet, who apparently has some kind of latent summoning ability. It immediately kind of jumps out to us as the player is like, oh, okay, maybe it'll get expanded a little bit more on with kind of maybe what's going on with Garnet, or she'll discover something about herself.
Absolutely. Also, just to repeat it, because I know we've said it before, but it comes up every time we're talking about this era of Japanese games. We're going to say Aiko, probably, I think just based on how I've heard us talk already. I think it's Aiko, if you're going by the strict Japanese pronunciation. It's not a huge deal, You gotta learn, to roll with the punches in life, you know what I mean? Be a little, go with the flow, you know what I mean?
In the time before the internet, we all grew up saying these names just however we thought best to say them, so we just gotta kind of go with how we've been saying them for years.
Right. You gotta be a smooth kind of guy, you gotta be a go with it kind of guy, you gotta be a stand-up kind of guy, you gotta be an adaptable kind of guy, you gotta be a smooth kind of guy. Yeah. I'm going to do that bit until I'm dead.
That's fine. Plus, I'm over 32, so I'm too old to change my ways now.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Oh, so old. So old. We get back to Madain Sari. It's not that far off from the Dwarf Sanctuary. Kondapeti is the name. But this place is in ruins, and immediately it seems like Garnet has some sort of fascination with it. It's really subtle, but she is taking extra note of this area, and we're going to find out more about that. Something that's really cool is that Aiko lives here with an entire pack of Moogles, which is great. Do you think it's a pack of Moogles?
I was just going to ask you, I'm like, what is the official, do we have an official, like a gaggle of geese, like a type of collective reference to like a gathering of Moogles? I don't know. Not that I've ever heard in previous Final Fantasies, so...
Maybe a school of Moogles.
We need to call up Sakaguchi right now, get him in this interview, and be like, hey, we need to answer this burning question.
And he would say, I don't speak English.
You're right, yeah.
Another funny little thing here is they address a PS1 kind of graphical concession here. Aiko has a pet Moogle, like a special Moogle that's really close to her named Mog. Mog is a smaller Moogle with a yellow pom-pom and a big tuft of fur around her neck. It's also a girl Moogle, which is, kind of neat. But she lives in Aiko's dress, and she'll like come out like a PS1 JRPG and then go back in like a PS1 JRPG, and they kind of address it, and it's pretty funny. I thought that was cute.
I like that it's addressed in games too, because if you play a game kind of like Super Mario RPG, when like all the characters like walk back into Mario so he can carry on doing like his thing, it's not really addressed. Also, I did a quick search to see if there was like a collective reference for Moogles, and the only thing that I see on the top of the Google search results is a Tumblr post that states a group of Moogles is called a flurry. Don't know if that's accurate, but if you want to take Tumblr as gospel, that's up to you.
Oh, that's a path down which I will not tread. Taking Tumblr as gospel.
Yes.
Oh, we were there. We were there when it was
made.
Yeah.
like the ring. We were there when it was made.
One reblog to bind them all and one to find them.
One friend request to bring them all. Anyways.
Aiko pretty quickly starts flirting with Zidane, like almost immediately. It's not obnoxious. It's in the same way that, little girls will often do to older guys. When I was student teaching, we saw this all the time. It's just something that happens with little kids. They admire older people. They want to seem cool.
Harmless kid crush.
Yeah, it is pretty harmless, aside from Aiko being very obnoxious. I can't remember how in-depth we talked about her, but she's a firecracker. She has the boldest personality out of anybody in our party, despite being 6 years old.
Yes, absolutely.
Right now, Aiko is going to go off to prepare dinner for us to kind of welcome us here, so we get time to walk around and explore. There's an interesting little mini game here. It's like the other mini games in the game where you have to assign the Moogles to specific tasks, and you also have to decide how much food to make. It doesn't affect anything except for some dialogue with Quina, but we do get to see Aiko kind of thinking to herself, and she says, "Grandpa, I don't want to be alone anymore." She's a very lonely kid. What we're going to learn here in a little bit is that the entire summoner village has died. She is the last remaining summoner, so she has nobody except for her Moogle. She's feeling deeply alone, and I think that's part of what drives her crush on Zidane too. It's not necessarily just she wants to be romantically involved, although she does. She wants, going back to the theme of the game, one of them, she wants a place to call home.
Mm-hmm. You just think about kids at that age too. Kids at her age kind of crave that social interaction. So. And she hasn't been like deprived of it. Obviously, like you said, she lives in a village full of Moogles, but I still don't think that's a substitute for a genuine human connection with other people that are like her.
Absolutely. We do get a couple of ATEs here that are of note. We get one of Garnet wondering why this place feels so familiar, and she's talking about how empty she felt when her Eidolons were extracted from her. She's familiar with the summoners just based on books that she used to read. So she's starting to piece this stuff together. We as the players can almost certainly ascertain that she's related to the summoner tribe because she can summon. But she's piecing it together in real time. We get another ATE of Vivi. He's still having an existential crisis. Thankfully, they don't just abandon that. Like some games will have a character go through extreme trauma, and then in the next scene, it's like, they're back to normal. Hell yeah. Vivi is still ruminating on this. He's thinking to himself, he thinks, Mr. 288 told me that I understand what it means to live and to die, but it's only because I thought stopping was different from dying. I don't really think I understand what it means to live and to die. Where do we come from? Do we go back there when we die? Where will I end up when I die? And then he starts to, he says, why am I shaking? What is this that I'm feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Still handling Vivi extraordinarily well. That's just going to continue.
Yeah, and the thing I like about these ATEs too, it's. I know I probably the previous episodes we've said it a lot, but at this point in the game, it does such a great job of balancing kind of all these story arcs really, really well. Like here we have Garnet starting to discover who she is. We still have Vivi struggling with, who he is, and now we have kind of Aiko starting her character arc as a brand new character, and the game just does a really great job of all these storylines are kind of running concurrent to one another while they're in Medain, and it feels like each one of them gets just a little bit of time to kind of shine and just remind us how all these characters are feeling while they're here. Because like you said, it's not like Vivi just went through existential crisis and then the game's just like, all right, we're moving on now, despite the fact that kid Vivi just discovered the horrors of what it means to exist and be alive. I just think this is another perfect example of and I'm going to keep hammering it while we do these episodes of how great the game just handles all of these storylines. It doesn't do it perfectly everywhere, but here I think it's great in terms of everything that's going on. And Zidane kind of takes a back seat to allow these other characters to kind of grow along their individual story arcs here.
Well said. We're going to see more of that as we go. In this village, there's also a special monument called the Eidolon Wall. It is this, it's kind of like a little room that's had the top torn off, sort of like one of those structures. And all around the perimeter, there are paintings, like cave paintings, the style of cave paintings of different Eidolons. And we learn quite a bit about this, but just to put some text to it, this is a sacred area. 500 years ago, the Summoner tribe migrated here and named the Earth Gaia. This is something that we found in the Ultimania, the Final Fantasy IX Ultimania. This is the point closest to Gaia's pulse. The Summoner tribe aimed to pray and use the Eidolons to become one with nature. That's why they moved to this spot specifically. And we learn over dinner that Aiko is the last remaining Summoner, as we said, and her grandpa died 1 year earlier. Mm-hmm. Also, over dinner, we get a Quina scene, a good Quina scene, where Quina gets to finally flex her cooking chops. Explaining to Aiko, like, oh, you always have to make more than you're expecting. Your guests might be hungry, more people might show up, et cetera, et cetera. It's really good. It's really cool to see Quina finally get some good screen time.
Teaching us how to be a proper host.
Yes,
something that's very important, apparently.
In real life.
Yes.
There's also a famous little scene here before we move on to more serious things. A nighttime scene with Zidane and Vivi. They're having like one of their little chats, very big brother, little brother kind of thing. Whereas Vivi's like, I'm so scared. I don't understand this stuff. And Zidane's like, yeah, you just got to go with the flow, man. Don't worry about it. That kind of thing. And Aiko is eavesdropping on them. And she's eavesdropping and she's thinking, oh, Zidane's he's got it put together. Of course, he's the one for me. I've made my decision. And off screen, you hear Zidane say, hey, Vivi, come here. We're going to do a ritual among men, a time-honored tradition. And Aiko's like, okay, cool. And we don't see this off screen, by the way. And all you get is little text boxes that say, tinkle, 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 tinkle. And they're like, doesn't it feel good to let yourself go under the stars?
Yes, the ultimate of manly activities for men to bond with.
It's pretty funny. I like this scene a lot.
It's very endearing.
In the Meguri mod, it pans out the display to be widescreen. But what happens is sometimes it bugs out a little bit, and you see things that are supposed to be off screen in the widescreen display. It's like when the developers will put a character model off screen that they don't need. They don't need to animate it running as it's off screen. They have it run until it's off screen and then it stops. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in the widescreen version, that translates to running to the edge of the screen and just stopping because it's now widescreen. So in this scene in particular, we're not supposed to see Zidane and Vivi when they're doing the tinkle, 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 tinkle. But I did. And they were just standing looking at each other over the cliff, facing each other.
Interesting.
It made the whole thing. It's so funny. I still think this mod is the best way to play, but sometimes you get goofy little scenes like this.
Nothing like letting it go into the stars while looking your friend dead in the eyes.
Eye contact is key.
Yes,
you gotta have it. You gotta have it, or else you're not true bros.
Yeah, exactly. If you're comfortable in yourself and your masculinity, there's no harm making eye contact.
The next morning, despite initially saying no, Aiko decides to tag along with us to the Ifa tree. I thought this was Lifa tree until I was well into my 20s because of the font, but Lifa would make sense too, but it is Ifa. The summoner tribe had sealed this tree off before Ico was born because they failed in Eidolon summoning. When they fail in Eidolon summoning, they usually try to seal the Eidolon there so it doesn't cause havoc. That's kind of what they explain. And that's what's blocking entrance into the Aoife tree, which is also, by the way, what the dwarf people call sanctuary. That's their sanctuary.
I always pronounce it Ifa just because of the double I's. So, and I know you have a whole text block here explaining some of the word, some of the history of the word around it. So I'm sure there's so many different ways this is probably one of the most confusing words in the game.
A little bit, but I mean, a rose by any other name, right? It's still, I mean, we're still going to understand how this plays into the story. But she needs to break the seal in order for us to go inside. This is also, I don't know if we've talked about this already, but I ran into Ragtime Mouse for the first time here.
Okay.
Do you do a lot of the Ragtime Mouse friendly battles?
That's like the start of the friendly battles where you give them, they ask for items and stuff and you give them to them. Yeah, I want to say I'd probably done 2 or 3 of them by the time I got into this point, I think. Because you can start this quest pretty much as soon as you can get random encounters, I believe, right?
I'm not 100% sure. I think they always take place in forested areas.
Okay.
The little forests on the map. But
that would make sense, yeah.
I can't remember if you can do it on the Mist Continent or not.
I remember I did. I remember I always happened to, like several playthroughs I've done, I've run into some kind of friendly monster quest outside of the village of Dali, walking around there. Like normally I would like walk around there and kind of grind some levels. And when you wandered into the forest there, I'd like run into one. I'd always seem to run into one too. I think I remember on the way to like Gizmluke's Grotto as well. I don't know if I've ever completed the friendly creature quest like all the way to completion before, if I'm being 100% honest.
Oh, that's interesting. I have, and I'm going to again for this one for sure. To talk a little bit about Ragtime Mouse, it is this like, I don't really know how to describe him. I'm looking right at him and it's still kind of tough.
What a great name though.
Yeah, for sure. He's not a mouse. He's like this humanoid-shaped monster that's wearing black pantaloons and this red top, and he's holding cards. And on his left and his right are a circle and an X, and they correspond to true and false. And every time you run into him, he doesn't attack you, but he asks you a question about the game's lore. So some examples are, Treno's Cafe, card Carta, is members only, true or false? The 15th Lindblom War started in 1600, true or false? Condapeti is a village of goblins, true or false? What I love about this is 2 things. One, if you get it right, you get a ton of AP, which is really good, and a ton of money too. But it rewards you for exploring the game, right? It rewards you for talking to people. Like there are some people in JRPGs that are like, oh, I don't want to talk to the townspeople because they don't further the plot. They just say things. And it's like, yeah, but I love that they just say things, you know? I love learning that Lindblom Castle is larger than Alexandria Castle. Or I love learning that Bobo Bird is a bird that brings you fortune. Like all this stuff that's in the game that doesn't really matter, you're rewarded for it now. It's world building. I love it. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, and like you said, it rewards you for engaging with the world. So like if you go into like, most RPGs will have like bookshelves. You're like, oh, look at the book, and it give you a little bit of interesting tidbit you don't really think about or something like that. But yeah, in your journeys, if you go through and like make the effort to like talk to people or explore hidden nooks and crannies or read those bookshelves or stuff like that, you'll just pick up little things. And this is kind of just a reward for that. And yeah, I love this kind of stuff too. Like I love knowing that Lindblom's air cabs operate around the clock. Is that something that is like devastatingly important for the overall plot of the story? No, absolutely not. But it just makes it feel like Lindblom is like a world that exists like while you're not there. It's like, oh, of course they'd run around the clock because people got to get home and people got to get to places in a city of that size. So yeah, I like this a lot. And I was kind of mixing this up too, because I guess this would technically be kind of separate from the friendly creatures quest. So I just kind of got that mixed up in my brain. So that is my bad.
Oh, it's cool. Don't ever let it happen again.
Yeah. Welcome back to part 4. Eric is no longer with us.
Yes, I've sent him to the darkness inside the heart of the world.
Send me the Shadow Realm.
So our gang arrives at the Aoife tree. As we find out, this is the source of the mist. There is no mist on this continent outside of around the Aoife tree, and there's a lot of it. And in a minute, we draw the conclusion that, hey, this is related to Kuja and the mages we saw in Dali, right? Things are starting to come together. The music here is actually based on Final Fantasy IV's Moon theme. It is almost a direct parallel. It's another little nod. Let's hear that right now.
It's a great song.
Genuinely, I think it's really cool. Very, very cool. I don't know anything about Final Fantasy IV because I haven't played it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to know why they're going to the moon. Oh, speaking of callbacks, I apologize to go back to Ragtime Mouse for a second. If you are able to look really closely, and I think this probably involves like pulling the asset and everything, but if you look really closely at the cards it's holding, one of them does say FFX. And that is, some people will say that is a direct reference to the upcoming Final Fantasy X, because this was being worked on in tandem with Final Fantasy X. I don't know, it's really hard to see, but it's noted in enough places that I thought it would warrant mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, back to the Aoife tree. This thing looks like a giant brain. And I lifted something like Eric just mentioned a minute ago from the Final Fantasy IX wiki, and I wanted to read it just a little bit. Aoife is pronounced the same as Aoife, A-O-I-F-E, an Irish word which means beauty, but more likely intended as the German pronunciation of Eva, which comes from the biblical Hebrew, I can't read that, and means living. The common English form of this name is Eve, emphasizing the tree's association with life. The circle and cross platform on the front of the tree resembles the Ankh, an ancient Egyptian symbol for life.
Ooh.
There's a lot of symbolism in this tree, none of which I caught as a child, by the way.
I wouldn't have either. And just kind of thinking about the number of times we played the game now and just kind of what it means, it makes sense that all that kind of symbolism is tied into this specific thing, because spoiler alert, we'll talk about this, the Aoife tree, much later in the game, and it tends to have a much more significant effect on the plot than you would just first think right away, and just being like this sanctuary that people go and visit. So Aiko does us the favor, the solid of breaking the seal in this very like theatrical way. She plays it up for dramatic effect, obviously, and admits that she does that. It was all just for show. And she says that she's able to communicate with the Eidolons living life through her summoner's horn that she has very prominently protrudes from like the center of her forehead. Again, just a little bit more lore about people who are able to summon these devastating beasts and kind of what it means. And you're just kind of like, oh, well, Garnet can do this. But again, we'll get into that in just a second. And as you've noted here, this is one of the few like non-revisitable areas of the game. And it's important to like grab everything if you're going for like a completionist run while you're here, this time specifically.
Yeah. And one thing that's really interesting when you go inside, this whole design inside the tree is very cool. Like, it's not like you're just running on branches like at Clara or Burmecia.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's really tough to describe. Everything is shimmering in green. It looks like there's dew everywhere, but it also looks like it's inside, weirdly. Like, the walls are green. It almost looks church-like. And I wonder if that's intentional, that they designed it to look that way.
Yeah, I keep coming back to like, I don't want to say necessarily, like I know biomechanical is like not the right word for it, but it's almost like structure designed intentionally to kind of look natural. But like when the closer you look, yeah, it definitely feels, like you said, almost church-like.
Put all of this in your back pocket because this is going to come back in the next episode. Also, the treasure chests in here are blue. There's only one other place that we're going to see that. And the platforms only react to Zidane. There are platforms in here that function as lifts. They only move when Zidane touches them. It's not called out. I mean, you can notice it, but it's not called out. And turns out that's actually important. We traverse the branches and the platforms and the endless chasms for a little bit, and we come across a boss called Soul Cage. Super duper easy if you know the trick here. Everything is zombie, undead, so if you use curative spells or Phoenix Downs, super duper easy.
Mm-hmm.
This is also the first boss to use to cause the heat status effect. The heat status effect causes the target to become KO'd if any action is attempted. So if you're in heat, there's got to be a better way to say that than if you're in heat. if you're in heat and you try to attack, you're going to attack, and then your character is going to die.
Yeah.
Very, very uncommon status effect. Quina has a blue magic attack called Mustard Bomb that causes this.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first boss that's going to do that. This boss also says some really interesting things, and I wrote a bunch of it here. Here's what he says. Soul Cage says, quote, "Mist is not produced. It is a byproduct of the refining process. It is discharged through the roots of the Aoife tree. I contaminate the other continents with mist to stimulate the fighting instinct. This, in turn, leads to war among the leaders of nations and then to the fall of civilization. Kuja merely puts the byproduct to a different use." Vivi then asks, why are you doing this? And Soul Cage continues, "I cannot lie. Kuja used the waste product to make weapons. Weapons like yourself. Defeat me and no more mist will flow, and then no more weapons like this puppet here will be made. Answer me, puppet. Do you deny your very birth?"
It's awful.
Vivi can't catch a break, man.
Awful way of just talking to Vivi, yeah.
It's pretty funny because he says something to the effect of, "I've seen when my millennium-long life ends and it is not now," and then it turns out he's a super easy boss.
Yeah, right, yeah. Famous last words.
But that's so interesting, right? A lot of Sakaguchi's games will have anti-war themes, yes, but also pro-environment themes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is brushing up against that. This idea that there is a naturally occurring organism on this planet that is essentially what it's doing. Yes, it is promoting war, but what is the end goal of that? Presumably to wipe out people.
Mm-hmm.
This whole idea, this trope of like humans are the virus, man, that's so trite these days because it's been done to death, but that's what they're doing here, kind of, in a way. And we could reasonably assume, right, that Braun started acting bizarrely towards the very end of her life. We could presume this is why, because the Aoife tree is funneling mist into the Mist continent, which it got its name from the mist. And that's why Braun is on a warpath. It's really interesting. We're getting the pieces put together piece by piece, but it's all coming together.
Yeah, I thought more of the, speaking of the themes of nature, of kind of like that, the predator instinct, the survival of the fittest. It's like, it is that man versus nature, but only like the strong survive. But it has a little bit more of a sinister meaning because the Soul Cage mentions like the refining process and Kuja able to use the mist differently. And you also have to think about too, when we talk with Sid in Lindblom, that his ships function they're powered by mist essentially. So we finally find like the source of this thing that is not only spawning monsters and causing people to fight, but also uses like fuel for transportation. It seems to be something that has a wide variety of uses if it can create living black mages or spawn living monsters and also be used as fuel. And again, this will come back up, I think, disc 3, but when you realize what this is, it's pretty horrifying just to kind of tease the future. That's kind of just what I think about.
Well, yeah, you're right on the money. We don't learn that for a little bit, but like I said, this is all actually quite relevant, even though it doesn't seem like it here. As Soul Cage said, when we defeat him, the mist stops and everything around the trunk becomes clear. And again, I know I'm writing a lot of Vivi quotes, but Vivi turns to Zidane at this point because he's been pretty quiet. And he says, "Zidane, did I do the right thing? When I thought about how other black mages were being made for war, I didn't want that to happen no matter what. Now there will be no more new mages. I think they'll all hate me." And the only thing I wrote after that was this poor fucking kid.
He just cannot catch a break. Like, basically, since the middle of disc 1, he's just taking hit after hit.
One of the Mughals from Madain Sari runs back and finds us. Someone ransacked the village and stole something precious, so they need us to come back right away, which we do. Somebody stole the Summoner's Stone that Aiko has been safekeeping. It's like a family heirloom. And of course, she's going to put on the continuous tough girl act, but she begins to cry here. She feels like it's her fault. She leaves to pray, but as she does, a scream rings out. Vivi says it's the girl from Fossil Rue, Lonnie. She's taken Aiko to the Eidolon Wall. And when we go inside, yes, Lonnie is holding Aiko, holding her hostage. She knocked her out with sleeping weed. She is only concerned with the royal pendant, but found, quote, an identical one here in the village. So, hey, why not take it? The royal pendant, remember, is what Lonnie was after when we found her previously. And now, weirdly enough, there's an identical one here. Wonder what that could be about, right?
Probably nothing good.
Zidane tries a few tricks, but despite it all, she does get the pendant from us. We're in no position to barter. But just when it looks like Lonnie is going to get her way, that red-haired man, her former partner, busts in, and he breaks everything up. He knocks Aiko back into Zidane's arms, he pushes Lonnie away, and he says, I'm not here to help you, I just want it to be fair. He makes her leave the jewel, and he says, I don't work with hostage-taking scumbags. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
She's pissed. She's really pissed, but she's like, I thought you were my partner. Like, what are you doing? This is our job. But she has no choice here but to leave, right? I mean, Amarant played his cards and beat her hand. So she leaves, but then he turns to us. By the way, I don't know. We revealed his name, right?
We might have mentioned it's Amarant, though.
Yeah, it's Amarant. He's referenced as Red here, red-haired man. He challenges Zidane here, specifically Zidane, to a duel. And afterwards, it's a typical shonen anime kind of thing. He demands to be killed because he lost. Zidane won't do it. He calls Zidane spineless, no honor, and he takes his leave. We're going to see him more really soon.
One thing I like about the fight, too, is most of the fights are these static, you're standing in a row with your party and your enemy's standing in a row on the other side. Amarant actually moves around during the battle. He jumps to different positions just to make it feel a little more alive. It's really the only point in the game that happens. So it always kind of stuck in my head where it's just he kind of starts just jumping all over the place as he's fighting Zidane in the actual fight. So I just thought that was kind of cool. I don't know if that means anything or has any symbolism. I just thought made it feel a little bit more. It put itself apart from the rest of the fights in the game.
In all honesty, I bet they did that just to make it seem more action-packed than it actually is. Otherwise,
Right.
It would just be a one-on-one turn-based battle,
Right.
Before we leave, before our party leaves, I should say, Zidane hears Garnet singing near the water on this small little boat. So he goes down. They have a little moment that they get to talk. They get to kind of reminisce about things that are going on. But all of a sudden, they hear somebody else singing the same song. And this song has only been sung by Garnet through the whole game. Zidane even points it out at the very beginning in Dolly when we first hear this. He's like, yeah, I've never heard that before. Turns out it's Aiko singing this. And at that very moment, the song is being sung and the light is reflecting off of the water onto the Eidolon Wall, which Garnet says makes it look like fire. Suddenly we get this extremely important memory unlocked. And this is believable, right? Because traumatic events such as what we're about to learn about, they don't always stick in your memory very well. And sometimes they're just triggered and they come back. And that's what's happening here. What we learn is that the intro cutscene with the little girl in the boat and the mom, the little girl was Garnet. Garnet and her mom were in Madain Sari when this natural disaster we've heard about occurred. And we get to see it here in the memories. As the village is burning, it's being ravaged by this biblical fire and storm. A giant eye in the sky, like the eye of Sauron, can be seen staring down. We don't know what that is exactly yet, but that's a bombshell. Garnet was raised in the castle since she was 6, but she said before that she had next to no memory. She had to have been here. How or why? Unclear. She remembers the disaster, but that's it.
I really love that this ties back into the opening, because that's the very first scene you see when you start the game, is this ship kind of on the waves and two scared people in it. So to kind of tie it back to the start of the game, and you're finally starting to realize that, oh, this is where Garnet had to have come from, but how did she end up in Alexandria? Why is she a princess? Why is she under Bron's care? A lot of that stuff remains to be seen. But I love this part so much, just because it gives us like a nice tender moment between like her and Zidane, and we finally get more answers, and we kind of start pushing into the more like Final Fantasy aspects of the story, which I really love. And yeah, that eye, when we get to a part in a little bit with the eye, I have a story about it when I was younger, but we can continue on.
It is cool. And what's cool too is that we get a little hint at this in the very beginning, right? Because Garnet is the one that's daydreaming about this moment in the very beginning of the game, and she kind of snaps out of it. So it's hinted at very early on, and it's finally paying off. Unfortunately, her mom died in the boat ride over. Like, it was just too treacherous. She just couldn't survive the storm. And Zidane has a really poignant thought here. He doesn't say this out loud because that would be psychopathic to say to somebody. But he thinks to himself, the woman that she thought was her mother, Queen Bron, became someone else, and her true mother was already dead. Garnet has lost 2 mothers.
Mm-hmm.
It's so tragic. We don't often think of Garnet as a tragic character, but everybody in this game has tragedy. Maybe except for Quina.
Maybe you're right. Maybe except for Quina, but it's not all bad, because Aiko finally realizes, when they're all kind of sitting around talking about this, that she's not alone. That Garnet must be part of her tribe, or part of her family somehow. And so she decides that, I believe they go off and pray at the Eidolon Wall and kind of spend some time together. But she's having this conflict between, she's really doesn't want to be alone, and this group of adventurers just comes out of nowhere, and she wants to go with them and help them so she doesn't have to be alone anymore. But she's also kind of hesitant because she's the last of her kind, and she feels like some loyalty to her grandpa to stay behind and take care of their legacy as the last summoner. At least this is how I interpret it. So the fact that Aiko and Garnet have this moment where they realize that they're not alone, it's a really beautiful moment. And of course, going down your notes here, as it says, as we're about to depart, once again, Amarant just shows back up, and he's like kind of brooding and like, oh, I want to see what makes you so powerful and all this stuff. And he's like, I'm going to come with you too, and I'm going to follow you till I understand why I lost you. And you're just like, all right, man, you just need to chill. Like, calm down, please.
I do want to say real quick, it's homecoming moments always get me. It's one of my favorite themes in stories, and I love it when Aiko is able to look at Garnet and say, welcome home.
Yes.
It's a really great moment. I really like it. But yes, Aiko's going to come with us now. She's decided. Amarant wants to come too. Like you said, he wants to figure out how Zidane is so strong if all he cares about is friends. Let's talk about Amarant for just a minute. Easily the worst character in the game. Maybe my least favorite Final Fantasy character of all time.
All time.
Caveat, I haven't played 4, 5, or enough of 12 to judge. Look, I don't like 15, but at least the characters are people. You know what I mean? Like, Amarant exists solely for one scene that ultimately comes down to friendship is good. I hate him so much. I don't like him. If he were not in the game, it would not be any worse off,
Right. This too, I didn't know much about playing this game for the first couple times about Amarant's background or his motivations. He just seemingly kind of comes out of nowhere and has an issue with Zidane. And when you dig into it a little bit, it turns out that when he was a younger man, he used to be a bodyguard for a noble. And one day, like, Zidane actually stole something from the area that he was, like, guarding and framed him as the culprit. So he's kind of had, like, an obsession with Zidane ever since. And I'm just bringing that up now so that people, like, kind of understand, like, why he wants to hang out. He's just like, oh, I'm following Zidane for, like, literally no reason. Because I don't think that point is very clearly communicated in just the general gameplay and the general story beats, unless you kind of go out of the way and look for it. So just so that people understand what his motivations are, is that Zidane screwed him over when he was younger and when Zidane was like acting member of Tantalus. And so now Amarant's kind of had this just obsession with him ever since, which is kind of weird, but okay.
You can find that out in some ATEs that you get later. You have to do very specific things to get them.
Right.
Even still, though, what a flimsy reason for him to be tracking down Zidane all this time.
Right.
Just because he got framed by some random thief and he felt so deeply that he needed to figure out what his deal was. What a lame reason.
Right. Yeah, it's not good motivation. I agree.
But we got interrupted at the Ifa tree, so we are going to go back there for the time being because it's related to Kuja. And sure enough, when we return, we can see him riding above on his silver dragon. We get a little aside with him, and he's talking about the will of the strong and etc., villain speak. But he mentions something that says, he says, quote, "I learned of powers that would daunt even him over 10 years ago." No idea what he means just yet, but he follows up by noticing us and saying he will, quote, warm up on us until the elephant lady arrives. So he's planning something.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what, but he is. And we confront him. He insists, that the war was Braun's idea, and all he did was give her just a little push. She and her Red Rose fleet, Braun, that is, roll in at that exact moment. She is bent on destroying Kuja at this point. She wants total domination. That mist is really messing with her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And she's about to summon Bahamut. This is going to be the first Bahamut of the game, right?
Yeah, we have not seen him yet. I believe we only saw Odin at Clara and we saw Atamos at Lindblom.
Yes.
So this will be the first time in Bahamut. She's kind of been hinting that, the quest for the jewels, all the jewels and the pendant that she's been desperately trying to get is you need those to be able to summon Bahamut, I believe. And so that's kind of what she's been working up to this whole time, I feel.
Right, exactly. Kuja says that this is all going exactly as he had planned it, because villain. So to taunt her a little bit, he flies right out into the open on the silver dragon, and he gives her a clear target. Zidane and Amarant suggest moving to let Braun and Kuja fight. I actually think Amarant suggests that, and Zidane's like, actually, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Garnet is completely opposed. She can't let her mother die. Even, I think she's like, you don't have to understand, but you have to accept it. Like, this is still my mom. I can't just let her die.
Right.
So she asks Aiko, hey, what about that sealed Eidolon? Can it possibly help? Maybe. When we get down to where it's sealed, Garnet says, I can't with this Eidolon. And then Aiko confirms that it's Leviathan, and she apologizes. And that's it. Like, this is such a weird scene to me. And I was wondering, do you have a better read on this than I do? It's so random. Like, she wants to use this Eidolon. She realizes, oh, I actually can't, because she communicated with it. And Aiko says, oh, it's Leviathan. I'm so sorry. Like, what?
I always kind of felt that was because there's no mist continent outside of the mist, right? So Braun can't use her airships to get to where they are on the Forgotten Continent or the Lost Continent, whichever one it's called. So I always read that as, Garnet wanted to use the power of the sealed Eidolon to help fight Kuja, but because her mother was sailing there on a ship, and Leviathan is a Eidolon that like summons a giant wave to like crush everything in its path, that she can't use it to help. It's like literally the worst possible summon in that situation to be able to help her mom, who is literally on a boat. So that's kind of how I always like took that situation. But yeah, it is kind of weird that it's just the juxtaposition of this scene with all the others, with what's going on and the way it's kind of worded. And I was always confused too, because I thought when Aiko unsealed the Ifa tree the first time, she gets a ruby, which allows her to use the summon Carbuncle. I thought that was the seal or failed summon that was being referred to. So I'm just like, oh, there's another one sealed here. It's Leviathan. So yeah, the whole kind of scenario with this, it seems really confusing. I just always assumed it as I can't use Leviathan because I'll literally kill my mom with a giant tidal wave. That's how I took it. So
I suppose so. It's just weird. I don't know why
I
it's
agree
here.
with you. Like if you were just to take it out, like it wouldn't really change the following scene.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Another thing I noticed, this is just a really quick aside. One of the black mages on Braun's ship that is helping, get the magic ready to summon Bahamut. It looks like it's in trance. Did you notice this?
Yeah, I knew they were trying to one of the commands was they were gonna basically shell Kuja and have all of the mages gather all their power into one mage and cast a super spell, I guess. And so then that mage starts glowing. Yeah, it does look similar to trance for sure.
Yeah, I didn't think that it was diegetically trance, but it very clearly looks like
similar.
it. I thought it was interesting to point out because that would certainly suggest that they are not puppets.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this aside for a moment, Bahamut is finally summoned, and this is done through a very grand FMV. It begins to attack, and it hits Kuja, making him bleed from his head a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Kuja, because he is a villain, is delighted at this, and it turns out he has an ace up his sleeve. He raises his hands towards the sky, and from the clouds, an eye opens. It's the same eye that we saw destroying Madain Sari in the flashback. It emits this strange pink light that is able to incapacitate the mages completely, and it turns Bahamut's allegiance. This FMV is so fucking good.
Oh, it's great.
It's essentially from Braun's point of view. I mean, not really. It's kind of over her shoulder a little bit. She's on the red rose, and we see Bahamut fly up literally face to face with Braun and charge up his beam. And then he just starts destroying each ship one by one. Mages and soldiers are just getting blasted into the water. Even just seeing this scene, we know, Braun is dead. There is no way she survived that.
This scene in specifically, I remember when I was younger, I was, playing the original 4 discs on my PlayStation 1. And I always got to this scene. In my first playthrough, I was devastated at the scene because when Kuja would raise his arms to the sky and summon the giant eye that basically turns Bahamut, my game would freeze every single time. At that specific spot. I played this part probably 10, 12 times just trying to get the game to go past that part, but it would not. I checked my disc. There was no scratches or anything like that. It would not move past that part. So I had to bring my memory card and the game to my cousin's house and play the game past that point. And on his PS1, it worked just fine. And I was able to get past that point and save. And then I was able to go on and play the rest of the game normally. I didn't have any other stops or anything like that. So just really weird, this one specific part that the game would just not, I don't know if it was the PS1 or the game, just wouldn't move past this one part. And then once I got past it at my cousin's house, I never had that problem ever again. So this part had always kind of traumatized me. And even now, even on better hardware, if I'm playing on the Switch or my PC or something, whenever I get to this scene, I'm like, oh, it's going to stop again. I'm going to have to go to my cousin's house and play it.
It's funny how that stuff sticks with you too, because, I didn't have the same issue, but more than once as a kid, my save file for Final Fantasy IX, no other game, specifically Final Fantasy IX, 2 times as a kid got corrupted, and I had to restart the game over. And to this day, I save in every game. I keep 3 saves going.
Yes.
To this day. Even though at this point, physical memory cards are a thing of the past, it's just not the same. I still do it. And that stuff sticks with you, man.
It does. It's gaming traumas. It'll be a whole episode by itself.
Yeah, shout out to PlayStation Underground Holiday Demo Disc of 2004, I think it was, that wiped everybody's memory cards. I still haven't let that go.
Oh, man.
Goddamn beautiful
very
joke,
specific,
too.
Very specific call out. So, but anyways, after we have this scene, right, Braun's ship gets annihilated. Bahamut's, the destructive power of Bahamut's on full showcase here. And you're absolutely right. This this FMV is stun. All the FMVs in this game are stunning for the year they came out. Absolutely incredible. But the scene fades to black, and we get this crushing scene that is narrated by Vivi, essentially looking on as Garnet finds her mother laying on the beach, and he just kind of says, "I don't know why Bahamut attacked the one who summoned him, but we found Queen Braun on the beach next to her escape pod. She could hardly move, and I thought she'd come to a stop any second." And he goes on to say, "I hate Kuja a lot, but I hate Braun a lot too. So much that I wanted this to happen to her. I should be happy, but once I saw Garnet start to cry, I didn't know how I should feel. I kind of wanted to cry too." And man, just Vivi for this whole game just crushes my heart every single time. It's an absolutely devastating scene, and it is a very sad scene. You should feel absolute hatred for the things that Braun has done since Disc 1. So much devastation, so much death and destruction that her greed has caused. And you're right, we should be celebrating the defeat of somebody that caused so much pain, but it's a terribly sad scene.
And it's more nuanced than that, right? And this game isn't afraid to examine that. There is, black and white largely does not exist in the human world. Even today, 2024, black and white largely doesn't exist. We don't like to think that way because it's very easy, and it makes us feel good to be able to categorize people and things and events into good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, everything is nuanced. And that's something that's been bugging me a lot lately, personally. Specifically, we don't have to get into politics or anything like that, but real life issues, they are so much more nuanced than I think people think. And then you go to Twitter and people are just throwing around words like, "Oh, this person doesn't like this. They're a Nazi. This person doesn't like this. They're a whatever." And it's like, I'm not saying that those ideas are not becoming more prevalent, and that's terrifying, but words have meaning, first of all, and second of all, just because somebody doesn't agree with you doesn't mean that they're a demon. It's insane. I don't want to derail the conversation, man, but here things are not so black and white. Yeah, Vivi wanted to hate Braun and he wanted this to happen, but now the reality has occurred. Suddenly it's not so simple. And Braun gets her final words to Garnet here. She's back to her normal self. She's free of greed, and she tells Garnet that the people will be happier with her on the throne, and she dies, more or less in Garnet's arms. They then return to Alexandria via the pods, and they take the body with them to do the funeral, and that ends Disc 2. So just to recap, we ended Disc 1 annihilated by Beatrix, practically dying in the rain. We end Disc 2 with Braun having been massacred and dying. Not a lot of positive moments that we're ending on with these discs, huh?
No, not at all. And one other thing too, I kind of just wanted to mention as well is, and this is something that I don't think this is a overt theme that Final Fantasy IX is trying to express, but it's just something I've thought about as I've kind of grown up. And we talk a lot about our generation, and I've talked with some friends and stuff that have, we talk a lot. Our generation is famously known as, like, we go to therapy and stuff, and we try to work on our mental health. And a lot of the things we try to unpack is like trauma from our childhood that was caused either intentionally or unintentionally by our parents, right? And when I look at Garnet and Braun, I kind of see this a little bit, that despite the fact of how awful Braun has been to Garnet, she still loves her mother as a person and still wants to be able to help her and save her. And I think that just kind of speaks to like this societal structure of like the family unit, right? It's like, well, of course, our parents, we should be loyal to our parents. We should have allegiance to our parents because they brought us into this world. Some would consider that a big mistake, but they brought us into this world, and we feel like we need to love them and protect them and all that kind of stuff. And, there comes a point where your parents can also inflict trauma on you, like I said, intentionally or unintentionally. And I just kind of think about this dynamic with Garnet and Bronn, and kind of, some people have realized, hey, I need to break away from my family, break away from my parents, and not have that trauma in my life anymore, because, it did a lot of damage to who I am as a person today, and I need to kind of heal that. And just because you have a person that is a parent over you doesn't mean that you owe them unwavering loyalty and love, especially if they mistreat you. So I was just thinking about that during this part too. It's not an inherent theme of 9. It's not something that it tries to communicate explicitly, but I just think about that as well.
It's an interesting dichotomy. And it goes back to the idea that things are nuanced. It's not that simple.
Right.
On one hand, what you said is correct, right? There are a lot of people that believe that family is incredibly important, particularly parents, because like you said, they created your life. I'm not trying to downplay the idea of how best to put this. I'm not trying to downplay the idea that some family maybe shouldn't be family. I don't want to, we don't have to get into it, but I have cut family members out of my life entirely because I felt that I needed to. Otherwise, my life would be worse for it. That happens. But here, I think what they're examining is on one hand, yes, Bronn was brainwashed by the mist, right? I mean, she literally wasn't herself. But if you look past the literal surface level here, it is a commentary on that. It's family is important, especially in Japan. I mean, they're a very... The family unit in Japan and bloodline is way more important than it is in the States. So nuance, man. I mean, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
This starts disc 3. Disc 3 is largely considered to be where the game begins to get less good. I have held this opinion in the past. I think there are some pacing issues, storytelling issues with disc 3. I don't know that I feel the same way. I'm going to hold off until we get fully through it. But one thing that I appreciate, I will say this, as an adult now, we have just gone through a lot. We have gone through Black Mage Village, the whole scene with the Aoife tree, learning about Garnet's past, seeing her mom die. Disc 3 begins very slowly with not a lot of action, and I appreciate that now. We get some time to breathe, and it's good. This disc opens with Dr. Ted, Beatrix and Steiner laying flowers at Bronn's grave. The time is drawing near to coronate Garnet as queen. As they're preparing to do all of that, we kind of go back to the pub with Zidane, Ruby, and Tantalus. Zidane is really depressed, as we're going to come to find this as this whole scenario goes along, because now that Garnet's becoming crowned as queen, he's likely not going to be able to see her ever again. Is this believable to you? It's selfish, to be sure, but I mean, this is believable, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so, because if you kind of examine Zidane's character, right, his main defining characteristics is he's been kind of a skirt chaser his whole life, and he is only 16, I believe. So at this point in your life, you would be kind of discovering, if you're starting to date in high school or a little after, what love actually is and how that feeling feels. And the first one is always still really hard to get over. So he's kind of processing the feelings that he didn't have the chance to ever fully have a relationship with Garnet. He didn't have a chance to tell her how he feels. And I think now that he's realizing that he's never going to be able to see her personally again, he'd probably be able to see her, but she's a queen now. It's not just going to be one-on-one time. He's realizing all of these missed opportunities, or all these things that maybe he thought he could have done different to express it the way he felt to her. And that's that feeling sucks. As a person that's kind of gone through the same thing, speaking from a little bit of experience, that feeling sucks. Is it selfish? Like, absolutely. But love is not logical. And those feelings really eat at you and put you in a place like Zidane is feeling. So I believe it 100%.
It's not logical? This is the first I'm hearing of this.
Imagine that. Love makes us do stupid things.
I thought it was black and white.
Oh,
personally.
No. Not at all.
We're going to take control of Vivi here. Again, this section of the game is going to be a little bit lighter. It's, frankly, to me, it's a welcome reprieve. And it's full of character development.
Yes.
Which is great. Not fetch quests like Final Fantasy 16. Amazing. Sorry, I know you're a Final Fantasy 16 enjoyer, Eric.
That's okay.
Shout out to Dave Jackson's show, Tales from the Backlog, and Nikolai's show, Friday Night Gamescast, where you and I talked about Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah, we talked about that game a lot.
More than I ever expected to. Based on Vivi's comments to Blank, he runs into Blank outside. It seems like some time has passed since the Bahamut incident. You know, maybe a year, maybe not quite a year, but a couple months. Who knows? A couple weeks, not sure. Well, no, I guess it wouldn't be a couple months because Braun's funeral has, just recently happened. Anyways, there's a Hip Hall racing game here. Did you play it?
Not this time, but I know of it.
Yeah, I didn't play it this time either. It's just a button masher where you race Hip Hall. I think his mom is like, yeah, Hip Hall needs to work out. Let's get him running the streets.
I love that name too, Hip Hall. That's a great name, especially for his character.
A plus name. One of my favorite NPC sprites in the game too.
It harkens back to it just reminds me of the first time you visit Alexandria with Vivi and you can play the jump rope game. So it kind of reminds me of the same thing.
God. Well, except it's not terrible.
Yeah, you're right.
You know what's funny is I was watching interviews with the developers of this, like the design team. It's all on Square's website. You can find this. And they did it in 2020. And they kind of talked about the jump rope game. And they were like, yeah, of course we played it. Like, we didn't get very far, though. Like, of course we didn't. It's like, that's so funny that they saw it as kind of a joke, too.
Yeah. Oh, that game is awful. I hate it.
We get some ATEs. Basically, they're just explaining that Aiko is here at the castle, too. We also get to see Artemisian, the purple mailman Moogle.
Yes.
we're going to talk about that, I think, at the end of next episode if there's time. But we do get to see him. It's very cute. He's a purple Moogle. Looks really cool.
One of my favorite design Moogles.
Absolutely. We're Tantalus and Vivi, they're going to go see Ruby's play. It's just a lot of downtime. It's okay. We cut to Garnet. She really wants to see Zidane, but there's just no time, right? Because she's about to be coronated. Dr. Toot gives her the jewels back.
It's hot.
Thank you. From which Braun extracted the Eidolons. We can equip all of these later to gain our summon magic back. It's pretty cool. And now there's this whole little mini side quest with Aiko. I love this.
Oh, this is great.
She gets Dr. Ted's help to write a love letter to Zidane. This whole sequence is very funny. She runs into him and she says, "Hey, nerd, you're a nerd. Help me write a letter." And he's like, he agrees. He notices her horn, which kind of gets him interested in her.
Right.
But he's like, "Yeah, I'll help you." So she writes the letter. Aiko gets bumped by Baku in the castle. She kind of falls onto one of the, what do you call it? One of the statues. Like she's dangling on the pike of one of the statues. It's
something like that, yeah.
Like a cartoon, But she drops the letter and she says, "Hey, Baku, can you deliver that to Zidane?" Baku says, "Yeah, sure." Baku
terrible
then
decision.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Baku bumps into Steiner. A little bit of character growth with Steiner. He admits to Baku, he's like, "Yeah, you saved my life. I still think you're a bunch of thieves, but, maybe Zidane could teach you some manners." Steiner's getting there. But Baku sneezes and drops Aiko's love letter. Beatrix picks it up, and she was like, "Oh, I heard Steiner yelling, so this must be for me." So she assumes that Steiner wrote her a love letter.
So you're probably imagining how I ended up here.
Yeah.
The whole scene. Yeah, it's exactly the scene right there.
This doesn't happen all right in a row, but later on, there's a dock scene where Aiko is waiting at the dock because that's what she said in the love letter. "Come meet me at nighttime, I love you, blah, blah, blah." Aiko hides because she hears someone coming. It's Marcus and Blank. By the way, the music here is the only time it's used. There's a new track here that's only used in this portion of the game, this scene. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus and Blank show up. Blank thinks that somebody wrote the love letter for him because they picked it up. They hear Steiner coming because he's yelling all the time. So they hide. They drop the letter by accident. Steiner shows up. He picks up the letter. He says, somebody wrote me a love letter. They knew that I was going to be here. Who could it be? And then Beatrix shows up thinking that Steiner wrote her the letter. And meanwhile, Aiko, Blank, and Marcus are all like watching like from the distance. They're like really invested in this. And Beatrix and Steiner, they kind of like come closer together and they're like, did you, is this? And then Baku just sneezes as loud as humanly possible like a dad and ruins the whole moment. I love it so much.
And I appreciate this scene too, because like you said, we just, through the end of disc 2 and starting kind of disc 3, we get a lot of information and we go through a lot, from Garnet's mother dying, Zidane's depressed that he won't get to see Garnet. Everyone's kind of trying to figure out like what to do next. All of our characters are like in one place, which is like the first time ever that we've all kind of been together with everybody. And yeah, this lighthearted moment is really needed after the heavy stuff we went through. It's really great, and kind of gives us a little bit of, oh, maybe Steiner and Beatrix aren't as like rivalish towards each other as they seem to be now, and they both kind of have softened up, and there's something going on there. But yeah, of course, Baku comes in and just, again, classic Baku, sneezes and ruins just the whole thing. I love this scene so much. It's so good.
Yeah, it's really funny. And we're going to, Steiner and Beatrix, we're going to see more of them.
Oh, yeah.
I want to jump backwards super quick. When Dr. Tot is talking with Aiko, we get a little flashback. We learn something pretty interesting here. Years ago, the real Princess Garnet had died. The boat from the intro cinematic that had Garnet and her real mom in it, real Garnet and her real mom, drifted ashore. They realized when it got to Alexandria, they said, hey, this little girl looks identical to Princess Garnet, who just died. And this little girl's mom here in the boat is dead. Maybe we'll take her in and we'll just pretend that she's Princess Garnet so as to not like cause a controversy in the kingdom. One little problem. Real Garnet had a horn. So the king ordered the horn to be cut off. And there's like a little side text here that he's like, yeah, the baby screamed out in pain. And I really like that. But they ordered the horn to be cut off. And then they just raised the king and Queen Braun, this new little girl, to replace Garnet. Mm-hmm. Tot already told Beatrix and Steiner, and everybody knows. Nobody cares. Like they're just like, that doesn't matter. You're still you, and we're loyal to you.
Yeah,
it's really sweet. You can also, fun fact, I don't know if you know this, Eric. You can learn Garnet's real name in this game.
Can you?
It is a convoluted and totally unintuitive way to learn it, but it's at the Eidolon wall later on in the game. You can return to it. You have to do. I'll bring it up again when we get there. You have to do something really inane, like run around in the circle 9 times, and then you'll hear a little sound effect, and then you turn around and run around in the circle like 5 times, and then you can read something on the wall.
Okay, so it's like dodge lightning 100 times in Final Fantasy X, something like that.
You know what it is? It's a way for them to sell the Final Fantasy IX Brady Games official guide.
Yeah,
with the
you're
online
right.
With the online expansion of $20 a month.
I was actually not aware of that, if I'm being 100% honest. And I always
really?
Yeah, I always forget too that plot point, because I'm always just like, oh yes, of course, like Garnet was adopted by Braun and Braun's husband. I always forget that they had a child before that died, and they just kind of replaced that child with Garnet. I always forget that plot point for whatever reason.
It's easy to move over because this is really the only time it's addressed, but it does explain why Garnet doesn't have her horn, right? And you can say that it's a little unbelievable that it only exists to tie up like a loose end, but I don't know, like the notion of someone in a royal position dying and being replaced, we see it all. I mean, I don't know that it happens, but we hear about it. Remember Paul McCartney?
Yeah.
He died.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
got replaced.
He was walking differently on the Abbey Road cover, so clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Fall.
Yeah. Fall McCartney. Yes. Hip Paul McCartney.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Bring it full circle.
Listeners, if anybody is out there and they can draft an image of Paul McCartney mixed with Hip Hall from Final Fantasy IX, I will pay you. I will pay you money. Like your no price is too high. Reach out.
No price is too high. But no, I agree with you. It does happen, and it would make sense why their motivations would be that, because if I know anything from watching Game of Thrones, it's that you always want to protect the bloodline and protect your power in the kingdom, right? So they wouldn't want this to get out and have it be like a scandal, like you said. So like, it makes sense. Of course it makes sense.
One small scene that I skipped over a little bit. The whole crew goes to the castle. Steiner agrees to let them see Garnet. He's not for it at first because it's Zidane, but then when Vivi shows up, he's like, "Oh, Master Vivi," and he's like, "Well, yes, I can arrange this meeting." She's dressed in her regalia. She looks beautiful, but Zidane just can't find the words to speak to her. He's like, I had this whole speech prepared, but it would have been a lie. I would have said like, yeah, come to me anytime you need help, but that's not how I feel at all. Mm-hmm. It's part of this larger idea that Zidane is really feeling depressed about potentially never seeing Garnet again.
I feel for him, man. I really do.
And neither of them will articulate it to each other.
Right.
Because of course they're 16. Why would they? Right. Got to remember they're 16.
I can't say I ever dated somebody who was about to become a queen, but I can't imagine that scenario can't be easy.
I don't know about you, man. I think all women are queens.
Oh, you're right.
Damn it. Where's my applause? Yeah. Somebody give me applause.
Oh, I look awful. I'm going to get canceled now. Oh.
So moving the plot forward just a little bit, everybody meets by happenstance at the pub. Tot wants to speak more to Aiko, and he suggests going to his place in Treno. Turns out there's a card tournament going on that Zidane wants to enter, so we're going to Treno. We get some leisure time before any serious talk with Ted happens about the summoners. So we've got time to explore. You can return your Stellatio if you have any more of those. You can get the dark matter at the auction house right now if you want to get the Odin summon. But otherwise, it's time for the Tetramaster card tournament.
Yep.
Quick note, I tried to walk in without registering and I got honked by the trumpet goose. He honks at you to scold you. It was very funny to me. I thought it was...
That's very amusing, yes.
All right, man. It's let's talk Tetramaster.
What do you want to talk about?
I have a hot take.
Go for it.
I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be.
Okay.
I really don't.
Okay.
People make it out to be so random, and there is an element of RNG. I very rarely lose because of RNG in Tetramaster. I don't think it's as big of a deal as people make it out to be. I can see why. I can see why people like Triple Triad from Final Fantasy VIII more. I get it. I just don't think Tetramaster is as bad as everyone makes it out to be. They talk about it like it's this scourge of a black mark on this game, but like it's fine, you know?
I will say it's certainly not the worst kind of mini/side/card game thing I've ever experienced in a video game. I don't think it's a problem with Tetramaster itself specifically. I just think it's probably a problem with me. I do not enjoy any card games in video games. Like I don't like them. Triple Triad, I understand is very good. Like I get it. I don't necessarily have an issue with it. I think just card games in general. I think it's because of my distaste for like deck building games in general. It's just like anything that has to do with like cards or deck building or anything like that. Like I am just not good at. My brain does not work that way. Even like Gwent in The Witcher or card games that are supposed to be pretty good, I don't have a stomach for. I don't like that they force me to play Tetramaster in the middle of this story when I just don't want to. So that's just kind of my issue with it. You're right. It's not. I don't think anyone understands like the rules or the symbols or markings on the card, but you can get by enough just like understanding the arrows and like the directional and how the game is played to be able to get past these parts like just fine. You don't need to master Tetramaster to beat this game. But I just don't like card games in general.
Okay, I understand how the cards work.
Do you? Please, if you could enlighten us, for sure. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so let's explain Tetramaster. By the way, that is one major con. I will concede that. They force you to play this card game. In Final Fantasy VIII, everybody tells you should play the card game, but you can go through the whole game without doing it even once.
Right.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I just played it. I should remember that. But they do force you to play it here. But the way Tetramaster works is you're going to have a card, and that card is going to have some combination of arrows on it pointing up, pointing in all the cardinal directions. And are the diagonals considered cardinal? No, right?
They're in between. So, I mean, like, they're directional. They're one of the 8 directions.
Yeah. Thank you. I was trying to think of a way to sound smart to say it. But yes, every card is going to have some combination of arrows, and those arrows represent where that card can attack. Each card is also going to have 4 characters on the bottom. It's going to have a number, a letter, and then 2 more numbers. The first number is the attack power. It's going to be 0 to 9. The second character is going to be a letter, and it's going to represent whether it is a physical attack, magic attack, and I think there's a third option. I don't quite remember. And the last 2 numbers are the defense of the card. For example, I recently got the Alexander card in my playthrough. Alexander has 0 attack. I'm totally blanking on what the second character is. I think it might be P for physical. And then the defense numbers are 46. So Alexander doesn't have any attack, but it has a shitload of defense. What this means is whenever you attack with a card, it factors in the attack power with the defense. And then also there is some sort of, I think, rock, paper, scissors mechanic with the magic versus physical. But all this to say, like, I don't think it's a little convoluted, but it's not that bad. I mean, all of this info is on the wikis out there.
They don't actually explain that to you in game though.
That's the thing. They don't. There are card tutorials, but I'm pretty sure the person that explains the numbers says something to the effect of like, I think this is what they mean, but I don't really remember. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, it is not explained as well as it could be. You're right. I'll give you that.
Again, this is my personal taste too. Like, I think in the grand scheme of things, there have been way worse side things that have been forced into games that you're forced to do. I'm just not a card guy. Never have been. I just was never good at the Yu-Gi-Ohs in school or the Magic the Gatherings, and I just think that my disdain for card-based games has like just carried over into video games. And if this was an optional thing, I'd be fine with it. I don't like that they force you. It's just like such a hard stop in like the middle of the momentum of the story. Like the story is slowed down, but I don't like this. And it's just here for like, you could take this out and it'd be totally fine, I feel.
Yeah, I'll give you that. You have to play a total of 3 card games here. You have to play 2 of them, and then you face the champion, this cute sailor named Aaron, which is pretty much why Zidane is here. The actual champion, though, is Sid. He is playing as an Oglop, telling Sailor Aaron to play. He plays with entirely Oglop cards. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
There are some ATEs here, like we said before with Amaranth's Past, like you talked about, Eric. You get one that lets Vivi meet an old friend in Trano, and you can choose to have Vivi either stay in Trano or go and visit Quan's dwelling. And there's one more scene that we get of Aiko talking to Dr. Toot about the crystals. The crystals that she swapped with Garnet earlier in the game, it turns out they're fragments of a bigger one, because this is Final Fantasy. One stayed in Alexandria. The others went to Clara with that harp, Lindblom, which is the Falcon's Claw, and Medain Sari. Still don't know what happened 500 years ago to cause that split. And we don't really have time to think about it, because a Moogle in Trano runs up to us outside of the card tournament to Aiko and tells her that Alexandria is under attack. Kuja has summoned Bahamut, who is just bathing the city in flames. All of the occupants are running for their lives, men, women, and children. The city is being destroyed. Garnet is going to give orders to Beatrix and Steiner to mobilize. We also get to order the troops. This is another quote-unquote mini-game. You tell the different troops to do different tasks around town. There's really no way to know which one to choose unless you're following a guide, but your reward for choosing all of the right ones will be angel earrings, which is a pretty good piece of equipment.
It gives you, I believe it gives you the auto regen, which is very useful.
Yes, extremely so.
Yes.
Although Steiner and Beatrix commend Garnet for doing well on her literal first day as queen, she starts to look to her mother's portrait for answers. She's still seeking her mom's guidance, but all of a sudden, the crystal that she's wearing around her neck shines blue, and it kind of knocks her out for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads into easily, maybe not easily, but this leads into one of my favorite sequences in this entire game. Do you want to lead off talking about it, or do you want me to keep yapping?
I am on the same page as you. Any given day, this is probably my favorite sequence in the game. There's a couple others that tie it, I think, but I fucking love this part. This part captivated my imagination when I was a kid. I love the music of it. Oh, it's so good. So Steiner and Beatrix basically charge out into town to start like defending the townspeople, because in addition to Bahamut basically destroying the entire town, there are these mist monsters, these mist walkers that are roaming the streets, and these things are scary. They have like arms like millipedes, and like their faces glow, and they just look like giant insects. It's absolutely terrifying. And so as Alexandria is being attacked and burned down around them, Steiner and Beatrix, you just are pretty much fighting battles over and over with Steiner and Beatrix in your party to like defend the town. And the track that plays during this is titled Something to Protect, which I love this track. It's so good. It's a reworking of Beatrix's theme, the Roses of May, I believe it is. It's a much more like upbeat version of that. Oh, dude, I love this part so much. It's so fucking cool. Like, after having your ass handed to you by Beatrix like 3 times, you finally get to like spend some time with her. Her and Steiner like get to fight together as their like relationship with one another is like growing, apparently. This part is so good. What do you think?
The reworking of the theme is something that I love so much because, like you said, it is the Roses of May, but it's put into this really jaunty duple meter in a way that emphasizes the character of honor, of pride, and confidence with which Beatrix and Steiner protect their people. As they're going through, Steiner and Beatrix, who once clashed, I mean, they're working together now as equal comrades, protecting their people. It's beautiful. You're going to fight, I think, like 7 battles against mist monsters who are also ravaging the city.
Mm-hmm.
And you're soldiering on. At a certain point, they're tired from the constant battles, and they say, this might be it for us. And Beatrix says, I have no regrets. And Steiner continues, Beatrix, there's something I must tell you. She says, what is it? And before he is able to finish what he was going to say, she says, save your valediction. So good. Save your valediction, Steiner. We'll live to see another day. And it leads into Steiner's first and I think only diegetic trance. And it's beautiful. And everybody, I feel like everybody just glosses over this part of the game, this specific battle with his trance. But it is, I forget if I brought this up in a previous episode, but when I was in high school, one of my literature teachers taught me that the climax of a story is not necessarily the most exciting part. It is the point at which the story fundamentally changes. Like, it is the point of no return. So I think back then the example we used was the Grapes of Wrath. It's when Ma Jode takes over control of the family. Mm-hmm. That fundamentally changes the dynamic. The story cannot return to the way it was before. I'm not saying that is the true definition, but if we are accepting that premise, then this is Steiner's climax. Up until this point, he was unquestioningly duty-bound. He did not question his orders. He existed to not be Steiner, to not be Adalbert Steiner, but to be the captain of the Knights of Pluto and the Queen's Guard. That was who he was. He did not have autonomy. But because of his travels, it's been slow, and we've been pointing it out every time it comes up. It's been a slow change, but now, not only, and keep in mind, again, something to protect, the title of the track, playing throughout. Now, Steiner gets his first diegetic trance, his first surge of emotion to protect Beatrix. Something to protect refers not just to Beatrix, but also to Alexandria. This is a marriage of his sworn fealty becoming one, or rather learning to live with and coexist with Steiner's own thoughts and desires. And the result of that is he goes into trance. This is the climax of his character arc. He will never be the same. He has grown and evolved. I love this scene so much. And I'm going on about it because Steiner is my favorite character. But this is a brilliant scene. I love it so much. I'm sorry. I know I just kind of went off there.
No, I agree with you 100%. It's even underscored more by, I think, too, when you've encountered Beatrix before, you had a couple of battles controlling her before where she fought alongside Freya as Zidane and Garnet and Vivi were trying to get Garnet out of Alexandria. And, when you fought her, she comes up across as this unstoppable force that can basically defeat you with one swing of her sword. And so having that contrast and showing that her and Steiner here are really struggling and how overwhelming these monsters are to fight, I think it really kind of just ups the stakes of the scene and makes it seem more dire and just adds to everything that you just said about Steiner's, rigid duty kind of fusing with the way that he feels as an individual. And finally, he has thoughts and feelings of emotions other than just the strict moral code of his duty that has defined his entire life, basically. Yeah, this scene is underrated. I wish it would be talked about more because you're right. It's one of the changing points of Steiner's entire arc, where he finally realizes through all of his journeys with Zidane and everything that he's been feeling, how to be his own person. And it's just juxtaposed against this scene of pure chaos, of pure emergency. It's gorgeous. I could do a whole episode, video, whatever, on just this scene because it's so good. It needs to be talked about more. Among the greatest scenes of the entire series. What do you do in Final Fantasy, people? Talk about it more. Seriously.
Yeah, this is as focused as it gets. Not only are we furthering the plot, we are dealing with the repercussions of what has transpired so far, and we're seeing massive character growth. The only thing, now that I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to sound like such an asshole criticizing Uematsu, the only thing that could make this possibly better, I think, is if somehow Uematsu slipped in some of Steiner's theme to this as well, instead of having it just be Beatrix's theme. Maybe that would have been a little too on the nose, but oh man, that would have been so cool.
No, that would have been cool, especially because it's something that Yoko Shimomura does a lot in her works in Kingdom Hearts, slipping in little snippets of people's character motifs to kind of tell that story. Yeah, I agree. That would have been cool. Still, Something to Protect is one of my all-time favorite tracks off the soundtrack. It's so good. It's so good.
After we do this final battle, we're back with Garnet. She is woken up. She's still on the floor, but she wakes up and she hears music in the castle somewhere. Music and light are always guiding us in this game, it seems. So it's somewhere upstairs, so we are going to go up. You're guided as you go here because you're going to be going through the castle where you haven't been before. If you try to go down a wrong pathway, this flash of light will just prevent you from going. Probably just a video game thing, but when you get to the top of the castle, these stairs sort of just magically appear, like Harry Potter style, they come out of the castle. Garnet doesn't know what's going on. She's never seen this before. She has a moment of doubt before declaring that she has to rely on herself now more than ever. So again, huge character building moment. I don't know why people think the third disc is bad wholesale. I don't think so.
Yeah, she finally realized. Yeah, she's like, I'm the queen. I have to do something about this. And she realizes it all falls on her. So yeah, big character development moment for Garnet for sure.
We're gonna go back momentarily with Zidane, Vivi, Freya, Aiko, Amarant, and Sid. Sid has built a mistless airship, but she's a wobbly one because he says this constantly. His mind is an oglop now, so he's not like as sharp as he used to be. So the ride is very bumpy. He says something like, I don't know what's going to happen when we're driving this, which is great. Everybody gets mad at him, too, for that. It's very funny.
I mean, if I was driving with my friend and he said that, I probably would be mad, too. So you're driving down the road and he's like, well, it's shaking real bad. You're just like, I don't know if we're going to make it to where we're going.
Yeah, you hear a sound and you're like, what's that? Don't worry about it.
We'll probably be okay.
We've all been there. Whomst among us.
Right.
As the airship gets closer to Alexandria, Aiko's jewel begins to glow, and she hears Garnet's voice, like in her head. And she says, maybe this is the holy judgment. And she says that she's being called, and she just jumps right off of the ship.
Yeah. Yep.
It's wild. And she's engulfed in light, and she's floating down, and she comes face to face with Garnet, who is also engulfed in light. It's coming from their jewels. And Aiko explains. She says this. She says, quote, a summoner's light of destiny brought on by the 4 jewels. This light appears when a holy eidolon calls its master, end quote. This is their destiny. Mm-hmm. Together, led by Aiko, because Garnet says she doesn't really understand, the two pray for the holy eidolon, to the holy eidolon for salvation from the darkness and destruction. And this is where Alexander comes forth. Alexander... I used to think Alexander as a kid, I thought it was a dragon, and we just never got to see it. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, it's a dragon that's so terrible and powerful and beautiful that we just don't get to see it in the game. But that's not the case. Alexander, it's a really weird summon. It's a castle, I think, with wings.
Yeah.
Am I right on that?
I would think so. And I've played a decent number of Final Fantasy titles. I'm not really sure how many of them Alexander's included in. I do know that one specifically I remember is I played Final Fantasy Type 0, and they summon Alexander to like end a conflict between warring nations. And the way Alexander is just, and it's like a giant, it's a giant castle with wings essentially. And Alexander basically ends the conflict in one attack, wiping out the other nation. So, that's it. I was always so confused too, because I was like, well, as a kid, I'm like, is it a dragon with like angel wings, or you're on top of Alexandria Castle that has the sword sticking out of it. So I'm like, oh, was Alexandria Castle actually the eidolon the whole time? But no, it's literally just a giant castle that towers over Alexandria Castle with wings. And that's the only way I've ever seen it depicted.
What happens here when they summon Alexander is it shields Alexandria Castle with its wings from Bahamut's attack. It'll try to attack, it hits the wings, doesn't do anything, and then Alexander attacks Bahamut. So right now it seems like we're in the clear. It seems like we've bested Bahamut. Kuja is watching from below, and he's impressed. He never thought that he would see Alexander, so he calls forth Invincible to steal Alexander. So once again, we see the eye in the sky appear. This is just like what happened with with Queen Braun having Bahamut hijacked from her. But this time, we see that the eye is sort of on the underside of a ship, and inside we're introduced to a man as the track Master of Time plays. We don't know who this is, but he says this. He says, quote, "You've gone too far, Kuja. I granted you the freedom to do as you wish in Gaia for one purpose alone. Now that you have lost sight of your mission, I will no longer tolerate your actions. You have not the slightest idea of who you are defying. You too, Zidane." End quote. What did you make of this the first time you saw this?
The first time I saw it, I remember as a kid, I wasn't really sure because I'd never, this was my first Final Fantasy experience, really my first JRPG experience. So, and I didn't get the references we'll meet this man later and discover his name, which is also a callback to earlier in the series. But I wasn't sure what to think of it, because just when you think you have a grasp on what is happening in the story, they always seem to throw in a wrinkle that takes it just one step further. And so when I saw this as a kid, I was like, oh, Kuja's like the big bad guy, and he's destroying all the countries and the cities and stuff like that. So obviously it's setting up Kuja to kind of be like the main antagonistic force. And now all of a sudden, disc 3, little kid me felt like I was making a lot of progress. And now all of a sudden, top of disc 3, we're being introduced to this new entity, to this malevolent, older, bald guy who apparently takes control of the eyeball ship that Kuja used to take control of Bahamut. So you're just like, what is this? And I would come to discover after playing many Final Fantasy games after this that just when you think you have a grip and a handle on the story, they always do something to kind of take it one step further. Probably this was one of the moments that cemented my love of the series and this kind of storytelling, where you're just like, oh, yeah, just when you think you know what's going on, they're always going to try and subvert your expectations, and that the Final Fantasy-ness of the story is just kind of picking up and kicking off now for the rest of this disc. So, yeah, was completely shocked about this scene as a kid, and still, to this day, kind of just surprises me the direction the story decides to go from here.
It has its criticisms. It has its detractors that think that it isn't as good, but we'll talk about that as this is expanded upon, specifically at the end of Disc 3 and Disc 4.
It's okay. They're allowed to be wrong. It's fine.
This Invincible was going to hijack Alexander, but it seems that this man has prevented this. Kuja immediately knows who this is, and it's Garland. Call back to Final Fantasy 1, like you just said, Eric. Mm-hmm. And Kuja says, if it is indeed Garland, he must know my plan. But why has he assumed control of the Invincible? We're not really sure right now.
We don't know either, Kuja, so please tell us.
So we're going to go back to Zidane and company super quick. We're trying to find Garnet and Aiko. Remember, listeners, a few episodes ago, we talked about an optional boss when we were being timed to get out of Alexandria Castle, excuse me. We're not timed anymore, and we're stronger. So we can fight the optional boss here, Tantarian. Eric, have you fought Tantarian before?
No, I can't say that I can't say that I have, so I'll let you speak to this.
It's a really neat optional boss. Very unique. So it's going to be level 41, which is higher than you're going to be right now. So it's going to be a challenge. But Tantarian is a book, and the way this fight goes, it's very interesting. First of all, Tantarian can cast Doom on you, and there's no way to get rid of that. Your characters are going to die, and you're going to have to revive them. Every time you attack this book, it will flip to a random page 29, page 273, and it'll do some different attacks to you. It does an attack called Edge. It hits you with its edges. Physical damage. It can inflict poison on you. It can do a move called Paper Storm, which is it attacks your full party. It's a strong boss. But what happens, there's a trick to this fight. You have to hit the book and do very little damage to it until it reaches pages 150 to 200. If it reaches anywhere within those, the book opens up and you get to see the real final boss, or the real boss. It's this little black blob with a little face. It looks kind of cute. But once it opens up to that boss, you need to attack it with magic. Because if you hit it again with a physical attack, the book closes. And then the cycle repeats. It's a very, very neat little boss. Yeah. There are some really nice things you can steal from it, like a silver fork, demon's mail, and an elixir. It drops some running shoes, which gives you, I think, auto haste. It's worth your time if you feel like fighting it.
It's a really cool fight. Yeah, definitely one of the more unique fights in the game, too. I'll have to go back and check it out next time I play through, probably this year again.
Yeah. You should definitely do it. It's not as hard as two of the optional bosses we'll talk about later, which is good. Our crew from the airship, they managed to find Garnet and Aiko. Zidane is going to go up alone. He tells the others to get out before Kuja attacks the castle. He's like, look, I'm sorry, I got to do this. I feel it in my heart. I just got to go up alone. But as Zidane is climbing, the Invincible attacks Alexander, which is not something I saw coming, and it demolishes it. It does one attack first, and it seems like things might be okay, and then it hits a second time, and you could see the wings just being torn apart. The castle is also getting destroyed too, and it's beginning to splinter.
Mm-hmm.
And a portion of the castle where Garnet's standing breaks off, and she falls. And in true action movie style, just as she's falling, Zidane jumps into her rescue using the same streamer things from disc 1 when they escaped from Steiner when they were chasing each other. Once again, a nice little callback here. Before we were chasing Garnet, now we're saving Garnet. Same shot. It's really cool. I like the shot a lot. But
I like the shot a lot too because Zidane kind of like has Garnet in his arms, and then as the shot zooms out, you see Aiko is just like above on the streamer, just kind of like by herself.
Poor Aiko.
Yeah.
This reunion is cut pretty short because Invincible is still attacking, and Garland has this little mini monologue. Here's what he says, quote, "More souls have returned. In microscopic proportions, the process still continues after thousands of years. Eventually, these circulating souls will no longer belong to Gaia. They must never be circulated back. Kuja did well. If only he had lasted longer. I never imagined he would choose to end his remaining days on Gaia. Perhaps this was his fate set in ages past. I too cannot escape my fate. Someday I must face your counterpart." End quote. So if you're listening to this, you probably have no idea what he's talking about, and that's to be expected. We don't know any context for this, but we can reasonably assume, I think, Eric, that he's talking about Zidane when he mentions the counterpart, because he called Zidane out by name previously. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
I would think so, yeah. You'd think there appears to be some kind of connection between them.
Yeah, we just don't know what's going on just quite yet.
And after this, too, he does this kind of final monologue, and he unleashes one last kind of blast from the ship Invincible that destroys a large part of Alexandria. Like, it's almost like if you've ever seen Independence Day, when they destroy the White House with the laser and like blow up the whole city. Kind of like that. Yeah. That's kind of the vibes I got. So that is the conclusion of our time in Alexandria. Garland lets out this devastating blast that just kind of devastates the city, and we're not really sure what happens after that because it kind of cuts to, we do like a little time jump forward, and this is where we kind of end up taking control of Zidane, and we find that we're in the royal bedroom at Lindblum after this whole event. Don't know who else made it, if anyone else survived, where anyone else is. We just wake up here.
Yeah, and Lindblum is still in the process of being rebuilt after the attack from Atomos. Like you said, we don't know how we got here, but we learn from Blank that Garnet is here somewhere. So we run up to find her. She's at the telescope. She's not speaking to Zidane. Like, she's not saying a word. He's talking, but she's not answering. And then he's thinking like, man, I really messed up. Like, what did I do? I just saved her, but why is she mad at me? Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, Zidane goes to speak with Sid because Sid has called everybody. He wants to just have a little meeting. A lot of this little meeting is just kind of reminiscing over what happened. Recapping, I think, is a better word. Just figuring out what the damage is. And we learn that Kuja, who previously stole the Hildegard 1 at some point, the one that runs without mist. We learned that on his ship, there are black mages. And not just any black mages, they're reported to be speaking normally. So immediately we can just, we think, are they the black mages from the village? And Vivi is like shocked. And we get an ATE almost immediately after. Kuja is commanding not only all of the black mages from the village, but Zorn and Thorn too. And he's treating them all extremely cruelly. One of the mages says, like, he's like, you over there. And he says, I'm Mr. 238. And Kuja's like, shut up. I didn't ask for your name. He has taken the villagers. We don't know why yet, though. Little side note here. This is where Sid tells everybody about how he actually got turned into an Oglot.
Yeah.
Kind of funny.
Yeah. I believe it was because he was unloyal to his wife. So,
yeah, he met he went to the pub and the drinks were flowing. He saw a nice lady and he cheated on his wife.
Yes, and got turned into an Oglop because of it. So if that's not a lesson on infidelity, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's great. Um, Dr. Tot has been summoned here too. We need somebody else that is smart to kind of figure out how we can get to Kuja, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the previous scene, when everybody first gathered here, Aiko had left to go and get Garnet, and she just returns just now, and she tells everybody what we already figured out. Garnet is experiencing traumatic mutism. I mean, that's not what they say in the game. They just say Garnet's lost her voice.
Yes.
But I looked it up, and I think traumatic mutism is like the name of this.
Okay.
The intense grief that she's been feeling for losing her mom, learning of her true mom's nature and where she came from, and feeling responsible for the destruction of Alexandria on her first day of queen, as being queen. On her first day of queen.
Yes.
Like all of this has just, it's causing her brain to go into survival mode, right? And her brain is saying, all right, well, you can't process this without having a breakdown, so speech functions are done for now. We're devoting time to making sure that we don't shut down.
Yeah, you have to understand, it's like this, I really like this approach with her character, because think about, it's been maybe, a handful of weeks since we returned from the outer continent where her mother died, and just think about all the stuff that she's been through in a short amount of time that she probably hasn't had time to fully process and understand her feelings about. She discovered kind of who she was at Madain Sari. Her mother died maybe like a short time later on the beaches of the outer continent, using power that her mother stole from her. She was forced to become a queen at the age of 16, while still trying to process all of these feelings. Then all of a sudden, a short time later, like literally, like I said, the first day of her being queen, Kuja attacks the city with Bahamut. Again, another thing derived from the source of her power. Her city gets destroyed, and she feels like she failed the people of her. So all of this happening in a very short amount of time without her being able to process it is just it's a lot. It's too much.
Yeah. It's completely understandable as to why she would, go mute at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's not like derogatory or offensive to say like go mute, but it's understandable as to why she would lose her voice like this. I mean, this kind of trauma would affect anybody.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that this game is a perfect representation of how trauma manifests, but we see it in Vivi, we see it in Garnet. I mean, we're going to see it with another prominent character in the next episode. It's, this happens, and I'm glad that they go there. Garnet's in the guest room right now, so we postpone the meeting. We go over to check on her. And of course, everybody is distraught. Tot believes that it's temporary. He's like, I've seen this before. She's going to be okay. She just needs time to process. Grounded thought. Good for them.
Yeah.
For the time being, though, we're going to focus on turning Sid back to a human. The thought process here is that with him back to normal, his mind will be sharp again, and he might be able to help us find Kuja and cure Garnet.
And build a ship that won't fall out of the sky.
Yes, good call. This, to me, is where the pacing sags.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like a big MacGuffin chase to me. What do you think?
Yeah, it seems kind of inserted to waste time, because basically they're like, Dr. Tot, we need your help, man. We need to get Sid back. We need to transform back into a human. And he's like, well, I've read some books on the things, and just kind of starts pontificating about what that might look like. And he's like, I read a book that had a comical tone that said if we get 3 old potions that aren't made anymore and mix them in a specific order, that should do the cure. So we need to find the unusual potion, the strange potion, and the beautiful potion, because that is apparently the recipe that Dr. Tot was just like, I remember it from this book one time, but the book had kind of a comical, funny tone. and Sid's kind of like, well, I'm willing to try anything at this point. I'm tired of being an Oglop. And yeah, wouldn't you know it? Super convenient that all of these things just happen to be in Lindblom, and we just have to kind of go wind them up. And Zdane's like, oh, it just so happens that I know Cinna has an unusual potion that may or may not be expired. So yeah, we go get the unusual potion from him. I think one of the shopkeep girls in the business district has the love potion. And I think the guy in the art studio in the theater district has the beautiful potion. So yeah, it's just basically you have to visit different points in Lindblum to get all these together. So yeah.
And it's so weird because, like, okay, I can accept the premise that Dr. Todd's an academic. He would have read, I read about this potion one time. That's funny that he mentions the book has a comical tone because it made me think of like reading Douglas Adams and then that revealing some kind of like amazing information or Captain Underpants or something.
Yeah.
Those two are the same caliber, I think.
Of course.
But they refer to these as like proper nouns, the unusual potion, the strange potion. And then he's just like, oh yeah, Cinna has it. And we go around Alice in the one district. She's like, oh yeah, I have the beautiful potion. Like, why do these people have these things?
Right.
It's so weird. And you might be thinking, listeners, like, oh, it sounds like this whole thing is going to be over really quickly. Yes. I mean, we don't even need to leave Lindblum.
Yeah.
They're all
like
just here.
2 minutes.
Yeah, and literally you just ask, hey, Cinna, do you still have the unusual potion? Yeah, I do. Let me go get it for you.
And they go out of the way too. I think Todd even goes out of his way to mention is like, oh, these are potions that was used in old times. They're not very common anymore. It's like, well, 3 people in Lindblum still have these old potions that are apparently not very common anymore. So
exactly.
It's very funny.
I really think this is just a time killer to get us to this next part here.
Yeah, it's very weird.
We get them, we bring the potions back, and we mix them together. We pour it on Sid, and he turns into a frog.
Yes.
Funniest shit I've ever seen.
I will die on this hill that Frog Sid is my favorite Sid in all the Final Fantasies. It's just like a little frog guy with a big mustache.
Yes, I love the mustache. It's this huge, big mustache. I love it.
It's great. It's perfect. And honestly, I kind of appreciate the comedic payoff of that they made us go on this kind of stupid, just unnecessary fetch quest for these unfindable potions that people apparently have in Lindblum. And then this is the payoff where we're like, all right, we're going to get Sid back. And it's like, nope, he's a frog now. That's not necessarily any better than an Oglop, or at least we're not sure, but he's a frog now. Frog Sid. Love him.
Yeah, it's very funny when they reveal to everybody that he's turned into a frog. They're all like, oh, good heavens. And I think Zidane's like, this sucks.
Yeah, right. He's like, of course this would happen.
Oh, shoot, Eric, I forgot to write down why we're going to the Black Mage Village next, but that's where we're going. Oh, never mind. I remember as I was explaining out loud. Vivi wants to go there because remember, Kuja is rumored to have black mages that are talking.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're nearby, Vivi is like, I kind of want to go, excuse me, we're not nearby, but we're going to go check on them.
Right. I believe maybe something is said along the lines of Sid and Minister Artania kind of mentioned that they know Kuja's base of operations is somewhere on that continent. And so they're preparing to go there anyways to kind of confront Kuja's. And Vivi's like, hey, we should stop at the Black Mage Village, as a starting point because he wants to check on his friends there. And, since Kuja was seen to have talking mages on his airship, maybe if any of them like stayed behind or managed to not get captured or whatever the scenario is, maybe they would know where they went. So I believe that's kind of like the process it is. Vivi's like, hey, this is the most logical point to start is this clue. So I believe that's kind of where they went with it.
And Sid gives us our first ship here.
Yes.
This is the Blue Narcissus. It is a boat, right? It's a boat. Blank is going to come with us to watch over the ship as we disembark places. I like, pretty cool. I like Blank.
Yeah.
So we use that ship to head over.
Sid comes with us too, doesn't he? I believe.
Yep.
Yes.
Sid comes with us. His whole function is to change our party.
Yes.
So we go over, we disembark, we get to Black Mage Village. It's empty. It's completely empty, seemingly. We go over to the graveyard and Mr. 288 is still there. And Vivi asks him, what happened to everybody? And 288, remember the last time we talked to him, Mr. 288 had said he doesn't want anybody else in the village to learn about their lifespan. He doesn't want them to feel the way he does, the fear. Well, they found out. they figured it out, and Kuja came around and lied to them. He said, I know how to extend your lifespan, right? This is human nature. I figured out how to prevent death. All you need to do is put your trust in me. He manipulated them, and the whole village, save for 3 people, went, and Mr. 288 is one that stayed behind. And we ask him, why did you stay behind? And he says, I don't know. Something felt like it was keeping me here, but he won't say anything else now. He reveals that there are 2 others, and I love this.
Yeah, so the first time you visit, if you explore the Black Mage Village, you stumble across, there's kind of like a farm area with a windmill tucked in the back, and there are 2 black mages that are taking care of an egg that throughout their society they found out, like, oh, if we take care of this egg and warm it, it'll hatch into something. And they ended up staying behind because they wanted to take care. I don't believe, did the egg hatch at this point? You did?
Yes.
Okay, so the egg hatched and it happened to be a baby Chocobo egg. And this is the introduction of one of my favorite characters in Final Fantasy IX. This is the Chocobo, Bobby Corwin, and they wanted to stay behind and take care of Bobby Corwin. So Bobby Corwin is actually my Discord picture icon that I've used for a long time. So it's such a touching moment. They're like, we wanted to stay behind and take care of this thing that we've been taking care of. It's a beautiful scene.
Yeah, I don't think they name it here just yet. But it is. Yeah. It is Bobby Corwin. We believe in Bobby Corwin's supremacy around these parts.
We do believe in Bobby Corwin's supremacy.
But you go over and talk to those 2, and they're like, yeah, when Kuja came around, we wanted to go, but we felt like we couldn't abandon this little egg. And, they're just talking about it. They're like, oh, I'm so happy. And they start crying.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is going on? What is this feeling? What is going on here? And it's beautiful because we saw before, the last time we were here, the mages were developing personalities. Some were growing a little bit. They were learning about what it means when a customer asks for the usual. And now they've experienced the creation of life. They're like discovering truths about the universe. Right after, by the way, they figured out that they're going to die. So like, imagine how they must feel. I can't imagine. And 288 comes around at this point in time. And Vivi's like, you stayed behind because of the Chocobo. And he says, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't understand either. And Vivi gets to ask one question here. And it completely catches Zidane off guard because he looks at 288 and he says, I'm going to die too, aren't I? Zidane's like, oh my gosh. Mr. 288 says, I don't know. Kuja said the prototype built before us would last longer. And Vivi says, but I am going to stop eventually. And they get to have this one more talk. It's not really different from what we've talked about before with Vivi. And I don't want to keep banging in on this point. But, Vivi knows that he is going to die one day. He's accepting this. But there are more important things to him to make life worth living that he needs to do now. And as he's explaining this, 288 listens, and out of nowhere, he says Kuja's castle is buried in the sand off to the east, or maybe west. I don't quite remember. But he tells us. He wasn't going to tell us at first because he didn't want to betray his friends. He outright says that. He's like, I can't betray them because we're going to go and cause trouble for Kuja. They might get hurt. But hearing Vivi's impassioned speech, he's like, okay, Kuja's castle is in the sand. It's buried off to the west, east, wherever. That's where you're going to find them. Please help us. And that's it. That's where we're going to stop for today. Sorry, Eric. I know I didn't write any of that in the notes.
That's all good. I was able to do it off the top of my head. So I think you said it's a beautiful moment too. And it's understandable why they would want to follow Kuja because it's very much, the Black Mages are presented as like full grown adults, but they are very childlike in the way that they're interacting with the world and discovering truths about it. So of course they would trust a man who comes to them with apparent knowledge and says, I can help you. I can save you from this terrible fate. As kids, we tend to trust people that appear to have that authority. It's not until we grow up and learn more about the world that we understand that people with that authority don't always have our best interests at heart. So yeah, Black Mage Village, scene of some very tough, very emotional scenes.
Yeah, man, this game has so much strength in its writing. In the character dialogue, yes. I think up until 9, like 1 through 8. I think 9 has the best character dialogue, and I don't think it's close.
Mm-hmm.
But the writing, you know, there's a lot of human emotion and depth touched upon in Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IV, obviously 7 and 8. Well, maybe a little less so in 7, to be quite honest with you. Those main themes are like capitalism and environmentalism, and then it gets into JRPG stuff.
Right.
But this game is so rooted in human emotion, and that was by design. Like the interviews that I mentioned before with Square, with that whole team, they talk about this. Like, this was all intentional. They wanted to make this a very human story, and that's part of why I think this game is so strong. Mm-hmm. I mean, you and I have both said this before, and we're going to say it until we're blue in the face, until we blue ourselves. I think this is the best Final Fantasy up until now in 2024. I don't think another one holistically outshines this one. I really don't.
No, in terms of a complete package, in terms of like what I would consider the things I think about when I think about Final Fantasy, I don't think this is, and I want to say too, a lot of these themes are a lot more strongly presented, because I believe at this time, around this time when he was working on this game and Final Fantasy X, I believe that Sakaguchi lost his mother, and he was processing that grief as well, if I remember correctly. So when you understand that and kind of understand the themes that he worked into this game and Final Fantasy X, it's just really touching.
Yeah. Well said. So listeners, this is where we're going to stop today. The next episode is going to go through the rest of the game. Woo. I wanted to get a little farther in this episode so as to make the balance between this and the next one a little closer. I really tried my best, but life happened. Please give me some grace. I have a full-time job. I'm doing my best. But next episode, we will go through everything. It might be a little bit longer than this one and episodes past. I apologize, but I want to give this game the respect it deserves. And I also don't want to add another part, because I have demanded so much of Eric already. And shout out to the USPS post office that finally released the hostage that was my present to you. I'm glad that they did that. But next time, we're going to go through the rest of the game. Hopefully, we're going to talk about some of the side quests a little more, like the chocographs and the frog catching quest. Mm-hmm. Well, there's not much to talk about that one, just catch frogs. Doing some super bosses with Hades and Ozma that I'm planning to do. And we're going to get to the end of the game, the notoriously criticized end of the game. And we're going to see how it holds up.
I'll have some thoughts, but Rick, thank you for having me on again, man. And to the listeners out there, I know it's been a couple hours of me intruding on your normally intimate time with Rick, but I hope that the conversations and the length that we're drawing out talking about the story, just lends itself some interesting conversations. And, Rick and I both agree that the conversations were good enough that we're going to devote more time to this. So, Rick, thank you for allowing me to be on this ride. Pixelprojectradio listeners, thank you for allowing me several hours to intrude upon your time with Rick here. So I hope it's been worth it. And we're going to finish it out strong next time.
Eric, you're not third wheeling, I promise.
I feel like I'm the third wheel between you and the listeners.
No, they like it when you watch. Wait, what?
Oh.
No, but this series represents what I love the most about games analysis, and that is celebrating what we love. Mm-hmm. It's not always fun to cover a game and shit on it over and over and over. It's not. And that's necessary. I'm not saying things are above criticism, but what I like the most about this hobby, about podcasting, about talking about video games, talking about music, talking about literature, poetry, dance, the things that I love, I will always prefer to talk about. And that is what this series is. It is a celebration of our love for Final Fantasy IX. It's a celebration, in some ways, of this show going on for 100 fucking episodes, which, again, everybody listening, thank you so much. It's just a big celebration, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't rather have it any other way. That's just all I'm going to say about it. I'm going to leave it there.
Rick's told me in confidence that the next 100 episodes he plans to be like just completely critical and shit on all the games. So you'll get plenty of that. Don't worry.
It's true. I'm exclusively covering games that I dislike. For now, though, that's all. Next time, we're going to do the community forum. Finally, it's coming back for next time. I wanted to save it to the end. We're going to go through the rest of the game, and we're going to wrap it. Thanks, everybody, for 100 episodes. Thank you, Eric, host of the Unlockables podcast, the definitive Kingdom Hearts podcast, for joining me to talk about Final Fantasy IX. Listeners, if you want to hear more of Eric's show, and I highly recommend you do, check out the episode description. You'll see a link to his stuff. You'll see a link to his socials as well. And, as always, you'll see a link to our socials. Discord, Patreon, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube. I need to add YouTube to the link tree. You'll find it all there. If you would like to give us a rating or a review, that would be much appreciated. I read a new review at the top of the show. I usually save them for the end, but we haven't got them in a while. This was episode 100, so I was like, yeah, I'll read it at the top. Very nice. So thank you once again for writing in. Smoke it. I don't quite know how to pronounce your username, but thank you very much for the very kind review. Yes, smoke him if you got him. Absolutely. I think that's what he's trying to say, personally. But until next time, no more hemming and hawing. No more of this Midwestern goodbye that I've started up here. We will see you next time. Until then, I am your host, as ever, Rick Firestone, the host of Pixel Project Radio. We're signing off for now. Catch you next time.